was a typical Tuesday afternoon just after lunch when Mrs. Smith clapped her hands, signaling the start of the "What Does Your Parent Do?" presentation. The room buzzed with the usual excitement, a few kids already fidgeting in their seats. It was an activity that everyone looked forward to. One by one, the students would stand and proudly announce what their parents did for a living. A firefighter, a doctor, a teacher, even a local mechanic. It was a chance to share something about their lives at home. But for Ella Thompson, this wasn't just another day. Ella had always been a quiet student, smart but not the kind to draw attention to herself. She wasn't one to raise her hand just for the sake of hearing her own voice. Ella sat in the middle of the room, gripping a small index card with her name written in bright blue ink. She was nervous, but she had something important to say. When her turn came, she stood slowly, scanning the room. She caught the eyes of a few of her classmates, but quickly looked down, avoiding their gazes. Taking a deep breath, she spoke. "My mom works at NASA," she said, her voice clear but soft. For a moment, the room went silent. Then a few chuckles broke out, not loud laughter, but the kind that spreads in waves, gradually growing louder as confusion set in. Some of the kids couldn't believe what they were hearing. "Nah, you're just messing with us," one kid from the back whispered. "NASA? You mean like the space people?" Another voice followed, this time a little too loudly. "She's lying." Even Mrs. Smith, who usually smiled and encouraged the kids, raised an eyebrow. She didn't laugh, but she looked at Ella with a subtle expression that said, "Are you sure?" Ella stood there, unmoving. She didn't react, not even when her classmates' laughter grew louder. She didn't shout, didn't get defensive. She simply repeated, "Yes, she works at NASA. She's a systems engineer." The words hung in the air, almost too big to fit in the classroom. Ella could feel the eyes on her, the whispers that followed, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't going to back down. Mrs. Smith, her lips pressed into a thin line, finally broke the silence. "Okay, thank you, Ella," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Next we have Sam." Ella sat down, her fingers gripping the hem of her shirt tightly. She could feel the heat rising in her face. It wasn't the embarrassment that stung, it was the realization that no one believed her, not one person, not even the teacher. To them, she wasn't the kind of person who belonged in a place like NASA. She wasn't the NASA type. Ella wasn't wearing designer clothes or speaking in big words. She wasn't the loudest kid in class, nor the one with the most attention-grabbing stories. She was just Ella. A girl with dark skin, braids pulled back with a pink scrunchie, and shoes that weren't brand new. To them, her dream was just make-believe. A piece of paper was passed to her desk during Sam's presentation. Theo, sitting behind her, leaned forward and whispered, "Did your mom clean the bathrooms there or something?" Ella didn't answer. She didn't cry, not yet. She sat quietly, staring at the front of the room, pretending not to hear the snickers and the murmurs. When the bell rang and everyone rushed to grab their backpacks, Ella stayed seated. Her eyes were fixed on the door, as if it could somehow offer her an escape from the shame she felt in that moment. She hated how small she felt in that room. She hated that she had to explain something so simple, something that was so real to her, to a room full of people who refused to believe. For the first time, she wished her mom had a different job, something people wouldn't laugh at, something easier to explain. But even as she sat there, feeling the weight of their disbelief, she didn't stop believing in her mom. She knew what her mom did, and that was enough for her. It always had been. Her mom had once told her, "Some truths are too big for small minds. You just have to let them catch up." With her head held high, Ella stood up, grabbed her backpack, and walked out of the classroom. She wasn't embarrassed for herself. No, she was embarrassed for them. They were the ones who couldn't see the truth, the ones who couldn't understand, and that wasn't her problem. Ella walked home that day, shoulders square and heart heavy. She didn't let their laughter stop her. She knew that someday they would understand. Maybe not today, but someday. And that was enough for her to keep moving forward. It wasn't the laughter or the doubts that defined her. It was the truth she carried inside her, the truth of who her mother was and the truth that someday she would be part of something just as big as NASA. The next day, Ella couldn't shake off the feeling of humiliation. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, wondering why she had to be the one to prove herself. Her classmates' whispers echoed in her ears. She's lying. NASA? Really? It wasn't just the kids in the class, it was the look Mrs. Smith gave her, that slight raise of an eyebrow that made Ella feel as though she were somehow wrong for speaking her truth. At home, it was no better. She walked in through the back door, her sneakers dragging against the wooden floor as she made her way to the kitchen. The smell of garlic and onions filled the air, a sign that her mom, Dr. Alicia Taylor, had gotten home early. Ella tossed her backpack onto the chair near the stairs and kicked off her shoes. She wanted to disappear into the quiet of her room, but instead she walked into the kitchen, hoping that somehow the comforting scent of her mom's cooking would calm the storm brewing inside her. Her mom was standing at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. "Late again?" she asked, not harshly, just acknowledging the fact. Ella dropped into the chair at the kitchen table, her arms crossed over her chest. "They laughed," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Taylor turned around, wiping her hands on a dish towel before setting it down. She could see that her daughter was upset, but she didn't rush over. Instead, she sat down across from her, giving Ella the space she needed to talk. "Who laughed?" she asked softly. Ella hesitated, looking down at her hands before meeting her mom's eyes. "The class. They didn't believe me. They thought I was lying when I said you worked at NASA. One kid even asked if you cleaned the bathrooms there. Miss Smith didn't help either. She just moved on like it didn't matter." Her voice wavered as she spoke, the frustration and disappointment flooding back. It felt like no one cared. Dr. Taylor took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing slightly as she listened. She didn't need to ask more questions. She already understood what Ella was going through. "Do you think you said something wrong?" she asked, her voice calm. Ella shook her head quickly. "No, I didn't do anything wrong." "Then don't wear their ignorance like it's your mistake," Dr. Taylor said, her voice steady and sure. "Their laughter, their doubts, that's on them, not you. You didn't lie. You told the truth." Ella's shoulders sagged a little as she exhaled, the tension slowly easing from her body. "But it hurts. It feels like I don't belong. I didn't expect them to believe me, but I didn't think they'd laugh either." Her mom nodded, taking in the weight of her daughter's words. "I know it's hard, sweetheart, but you've got something they don't. You've got the truth on your side." She paused for a moment, her eyes softening as she looked at Ella. "I know what it's like to have people doubt you. When I was your age, I was told by my guidance counselor to be more realistic. She told me I should think about secretarial work, not something as big as aerospace." Ella looked up at her mom, her eyes wide with surprise. "Really?" "Yeah," Dr. Taylor said with a soft smile. "That was in '99. I didn't argue with her. I just stopped going to her office altogether. But it lit a fire inside me. I didn't let her decide who I was going to be." Ella absorbed her mom's words. She had heard the stories before, about how her mom had fought for everything she had. But hearing it now, seeing the calm strength in her mom's eyes, made Ella feel a little stronger herself. Her mom continued, "I want you to know this isn't about impressing anyone. You don't need to prove yourself to people who don't see your worth. But if the moment comes when you feel like showing them, just know that I've got your back, and I'll be there." Ella nodded slowly, feeling a sense of warmth fill her chest. "Okay, Mom, thanks." She paused before adding, "But what if they still don't believe me?" Her mom smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "It doesn't matter if they believe you. What matters is that you believe in yourself. The rest will come." Ella smiled back, the weight of her earlier disappointment starting to lift. She felt a little lighter, like her mom's words had given her a shield to carry with her. "And you know," Dr. Taylor added casually, "I could come to your class on Friday, Parent Day. It might be fun." Ella's eyes widened. You'd do that? But what would you wear? Dr. Taylor grinned. I was thinking maybe my NASA badge and that black blazer you hate. Ella laughed, the sound genuine and warm, something she hadn't felt all day. Okay, yes, do that, please. Her mom chuckled, leaning back in her chair. Thought you'd say that. I'll see you Friday. As the evening went on, Dr. Taylor served them both dinner, the conversation flowing more freely now. They talked about silly things like the time her mom spilled coffee on a flight simulator at work, but also about the tough moments her mom had faced to get where she was. The more they talked, the more Ella realized that she didn't have to prove anything. She just had to keep showing up, keep being herself. By the time they finished eating, Ella no longer felt like she had to shrink away from the world. She didn't need to explain herself to anyone. Her mom had already taught her that. She had her own truth to stand on, and that was more than enough. That night, as she went to bed, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. She wasn't afraid anymore. The next day, when she walked into school, things were going to be different. Friday came faster than Ella expected. All week, whispers still lingered in the air, like dust particles caught in sunlight. Some kids tried to apologize in awkward, half-hearted ways. One offered her a crumpled fruit snack. Another mumbled, "I was just joking." But most of them acted like nothing had happened. It didn't bother Ella, though. She had already made peace with it. She hadn't forgotten what happened, but she wasn't about to let it define her. In fact, she was determined to walk into that classroom with her head held high. The morning bell rang, and the classroom buzzed with anticipation. Today was the day her mom would come in to speak. The desks were arranged in a horseshoe shape to accommodate the parents. Mrs. Smith, who had clearly prepared for the event, wore a purple blouse and had set out a tray of sugar cookies, clearly bought from the store. She tried, but Ella knew it wasn't about the cookies. It was about what came next. Ella sat near the middle of the room, trying her best to look calm. Her backpack was neatly tucked under her chair and her hands rested on the desk, fingers tapping nervously. She was nervous, but not the kind of nervous that made her second-guess herself. It was the kind of nervous you feel when something important is about to happen, when you know you're about to make an impact. She hadn't told anyone that her mom was coming. It wasn't something she'd felt the need to announce. Let them be surprised. As the clock ticked, Ella found herself glancing at the door. Every time someone walked in, her heart skipped a beat. The first few parents entered, moms with tote bags, dads with mechanic uniforms, and a woman in scrubs who waved a little too hard. There was the usual clapping, some light laughter, and stories about fixing things, teaching yoga to kids, and other typical parent professions. Ella's nerves started to settle. She was ready for this. Then, as Mrs. Smith introduced the next speaker, the door opened, and time seemed to slow down. Ella's heart raced. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. She had known all week that this moment was coming, but still, seeing her mom walk into that room made her chest tighten with a mixture of nerves and pride. Dr. Alicia Taylor walked in with confidence, wearing the black blazer that Ella had always hated but secretly admired, and the NASA badge that she herself had once felt too intimidated to wear. Her expression was calm, her posture perfect, and she walked into the room like she owned it. The class fell silent almost instantly, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Even Mrs. Smith, who was usually so composed, stammered for a moment before forcing a smile. And this is Ella's mom?" Dr. Taylor nodded politely. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Alicia Taylor, an aerospace systems engineer at NASA." She spoke with such ease like the room's silence had no effect on her. "I work on mission planning and flight systems integration for our lunar and Mars programs." She let her words sink in. A few kids shifted in their seats, some with raised eyebrows, some with their mouths slightly open. Ella could feel her heartbeat in her ears as she sat there, watching the reactions of her classmates. She wasn't looking for their approval, not anymore, but it still felt surreal to watch them process her mom's words, to watch them realize that this wasn't just some story Ella had made up. This was real. Her mom wasn't pretending. She wasn't just some NASA janitor like Theo had jokingly suggested. She was the real deal. I know most of you probably don't fully understand what I do, and that's okay. Dr. Taylor continued, her voice steady and calm. But let me tell you something important. The next time someone tells you something that sounds too big to believe, don't laugh. Don't dismiss it. Take a moment to listen, because brilliance doesn't always show up in a package you expect. The room was still, no one daring to move or speak. Ella felt her shoulders straighten as she listened to her mom, her chest filling with a new kind of pride. She had been so scared, so unsure of how people would react, but now she realized that her mom was right. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She had already done it. She had already shown up, and that was enough. Despite their engagement with him, Taylor walked to the front of the room and tapped on a printed diagram of a NASA project. "This is a system I worked on for one of our space missions," she explained, turning to face the class. "You don't have to understand all of this, but I want you to understand something important." She paused, locking eyes with the students. "When someone speaks the truth, when they stand in their own power, don't shrink it. Let it stand." Ella watched as her mom finished speaking, the room still, the silence lingering. For the first time, Ella wasn't the one trying to prove something. It was everyone else in the room who had to catch up. They had seen something they didn't expect. An accomplished, confident woman standing there with her truth unapologetically. And as Dr. Taylor walked over to sit beside Ella, the realization hit her. She wasn't just standing beside her mom. She was standing beside a woman who had fought to be heard, to be respected, and to make a difference. And in that moment, Ella knew that everything had changed. By the time Monday came around, Ella could feel the shift in the air. It wasn't some dramatic Hollywood smiley-face transformation, but it was real. Her classmates were different. The whispers had stopped. The stares weren't as sharp. For the first time, she could walk into class without feeling like she was under a microscope. It wasn't that everyone had suddenly believed her. It wasn't that they had all realized NASA wasn't just for smart kids. No, it was something subtler, something deeper. Ella sat down at her desk that morning, feeling the change in her chest. She wasn't nervous. She didn't have to glance around for approval. She wasn't waiting for anyone to believe in her. She already knew she belonged. And it felt like the rest of the world was finally catching up to that truth. During recess, two girls, Kennedy and Samira, who had once barely given her the time of day, walked up to her. Ella wasn't sure what to expect, a sorry or some awkward small talk maybe, but instead, Kennedy spoke first, chewing nervously on her lip. "My mom said your mom's speech was really something," she said quietly, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Ella raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Really?" she asked, a bit unsure of where this was going. "Yeah," Samira chimed in, her voice a little more confident now. She sounded like really smart. Ella's heart swelled with something warm, pride maybe, or something that had been missing for so long. "She is," Ella replied, her voice steady without a hint of doubt. Kennedy nodded, then shifted awkwardly again. "I looked up some NASA stuff after school. It's kinda cool. I didn't really know much about it before." Ella smiled. It wasn't a loud victory grin, but a quiet acknowledgement that something had changed. These weren't the same girls who had laughed at her last week. They were different now, and in some ways, so was she. As the bell rang, signaling the end of recess, Ella headed back inside. She felt lighter, more confident. But the most surprising part? She didn't feel the need to explain herself anymore. She didn't have to convince anyone that she was worthy of respect. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She had already done that. Back in class, Ella was surprised when Mrs. Smith asked her to stay after the bell rang. The teacher's voice was lower than usual, softer somehow. Ella stood and walked to the front of the room, her backpack heavy on her shoulders, but her feet light as she moved. "I just wanted to say something," Mrs. Smith began, her hands clasped in front of her. She wasn't making eye contact with Ella at first. She was fidgeting, unsure of how to approach this conversation. "About last week. I should have handled that differently," she continued, her voice tinged with regret. "I should have asked more questions before just moving on. I'm sorry." Ella blinked, taken aback by the apology. She wasn't used to this. Teachers apologizing to students. It was a rare thing, especially in a world where adults often assume they're right without a second thought. For a moment, Ella wasn't sure what to say. She didn't expect this. She didn't expect to hear Mrs. Smith take responsibility for something that had been so painful. But Ella knew one thing for sure. She didn't need to respond with anything more than a simple nod. The apology wasn't just for the moment. It was for the lesson, the shift in the room, the way things had changed. "Thank you," Ella said quietly, her voice steady. It wasn't a victory cry. It wasn't a declaration of "I told you so." It was just acknowledgement. She didn't need Mrs. Smith to apologize for her to feel validated. Ella had already come to terms with her truth. But hearing it from Mrs. Smith, that was just another step toward understanding, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. As the days passed, things didn't magically become perfect. There were still some kids who whispered behind her back, still a few who made snide remarks when they thought no one was listening. There was even one kid, Dean, who continued to mutter "NASA kid" under his breath every time he walked by her. But Ella didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She simply kept walking, kept doing her work, and when the whispers started, she didn't let them stop her. The real breakthrough came during group work one afternoon. She overheard one of her classmates, someone who had always kept their distance, muttering to another, "She thinks she's better than us." Ella didn't feel anger. She didn't feel frustration. She just looked up calmly and replied, "No, I just know I belong here." There was no argument after that, no deflection, no rebuttal. The words were just facts, simple and true. And something about the way she said them made the room go still. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't confrontational. It was quiet confidence, something that didn't need to be validated by anyone else. At home, Dr. Taylor noticed the shift in her daughter. Ella started talking more at dinner, sharing stories about her day without being asked. She began drawing again, but this time it wasn't doodles, it was diagrams. Things that looked like blueprints, like designs for rockets or space missions. Her mom didn't say much about it at first, but when she caught Ella sketching a rotating satellite with solar panels shaped like flower petals, she smiled. "Where'd you get that idea?" Dr. Taylor asked, genuinely curious. Ella shrugged. "I don't know. I was thinking about sunflowers earlier, how they turn to face the sun." Her mom nodded thoughtfully. "I love that. You weren't trying to impress anyone, you were just trying to solve a problem." Ella smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. She didn't need to impress anyone anymore. She didn't need to explain herself or defend her dreams. She was already on the path to making them real, and for the first time she realized that this was what it meant to be truly confident, to live in your truth without apology, without needing anyone else to believe it first. By the end of the school year, something had shifted in the air. It wasn't immediate or loud, but if you looked closely, you could see the change. Ella had started to feel more like herself, more grounded in her truth, and the people around her, they were starting to notice. It wasn't about the big moments anymore, the grand gestures that made people stop and stare. It was the quiet, almost imperceptible shifts that made all the difference. Ella's classmates no longer dismissed her so easily. They no longer saw her as the shy girl who had claimed something too big to believe. They had seen her stand firm in her truth. They had seen her mother walk into the classroom, speak with confidence, and own her place at NASA. And suddenly, everything that Ella had said made sense. But even more importantly, Ella had stopped needing them to believe in her. She had stopped waiting for their approval. What mattered now was that she believed in herself. and that was more than enough. One afternoon, during the final week of school, Ella was sitting in the cafeteria scribbling something in her notebook when she heard a familiar voice. It was Kennedy and Samira, the two girls who had once barely paid attention to her, now sitting across from her, looking a little more comfortable in their own skin. Kennedy was the first to speak, her voice softer than it had ever been. "Hey, Ella," she began, her eyes slightly downcast. "I just wanted to say, I really admire your mom. What she said in class, it really made me think." Ella looked up, a little surprised. "Really?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. "Yeah," Samira jumped in. "I went home and looked up NASA stuff, and I gotta admit it's really cool. I didn't get it before, but now I do." Ella smiled, not in a smug or victorious way, but in a way that felt warm and genuine. "Thanks," she said simply. She's really smart." Kennedy and Samira exchanged a glance, and there was something in the way they looked at her now. Something different. They weren't just humoring her. They weren't just saying nice things to make up for the past. They were being real, and that felt good. As the days went on, Ella didn't hear the usual snickers or whispers. She didn't need them to stop, they just did. It was like her presence had shifted the dynamic of the room. No one was laughing anymore, no one was trying to chip away at her. The more she carried herself with confidence, the more others began to respect her, even if they hadn't fully understood her before. But the real turning point came when it was time for the class to make their end-of-year memory book. Every year, the students filled out pages with their predictions for the future, what they wanted to be when they grew up, and who they thought would achieve great things. Ella had never really given it much thought before. In years past, she'd simply written down whatever seemed easy, whatever seemed safe. But this year was different. This year, she wrote something bold, something true. "I want to build machines that go to places no one has ever been," she wrote, "because someone has to figure out how to get us there, and I think I can." It wasn't a statement born out of arrogance or desire to prove herself. It was a statement born out of belief in herself, in her dreams, in the possibility of her future. It wasn't about what anyone else thought. It was about what she knew to be true. And when the memory book was passed around for everyone to see, there it was, written under her name. Most likely to launch something into space. Ella didn't smile when she saw it. It wasn't about validation anymore. It wasn't about the label, but in that moment she realized something important. It wasn't just a wish. It wasn't just a dream. It was a possibility that was becoming more real with every passing day. That evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, her mom watched her quietly from across the room. Ella was drawing something in her notebook again, her pencil moving with purpose. The diagrams were more detailed now. Rockets, flight paths, even calculations. Her mom didn't say much, just watched with a quiet pride, the same pride that Ella had seen in her eyes when she walked into that classroom. Dr. Taylor finally spoke, her voice calm and steady. "You know, Ella, when I was your age, I had to fight every step of the way. I didn't have anyone telling me I could do it. I didn't have anyone cheering me on. I had to prove to myself that I belonged. And there were times when I almost gave up." Ella looked up from her notebook, meeting her mom's eyes. "But you didn't." "No," Dr. Taylor said, shaking her head with a small smile. "I didn't. And now I get to see you doing the same thing, but you don't have to fight as hard as I did. You're already ahead of the game." Ella smiled softly, a sense of peace settling over her. She didn't need anyone else to understand her dreams. She didn't need to convince anyone. Her mom had shown her that strength wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about staying true to yourself, even when no one else understood. As they finished dinner, Dr. Taylor spoke again, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Ella. You've already done that. Now, just keep showing up, keep doing the work, and when the time comes, You'll be ready." Ella nodded, feeling the weight of her mom's words settle deep within her. She wasn't waiting for anyone else to believe in her. She was already living her truth, and that more than anything was enough. As the school year came to an end, Ella was ready. Ready for the future. Ready to build the things she had always dreamed of, and she knew deep down that no matter what happened, she would always have her truth to stand on. As the school year came to a close, Ella stood taller than she ever had before. She wasn't just walking through life anymore, she was owning her path, unapologetically, with her head held high. The whispers and laughter that once haunted her had faded away. She didn't need anyone's approval anymore. What mattered was the belief she had in herself and the unwavering support of her mom. Ella had learned something profound through this journey. It wasn't just about proving people wrong or changing their opinions. It was about staying true to who you are, even when the world doubts you. It was about finding strength in your truth and knowing that your worth doesn't depend on the validation of others. Whether people believed in her or not, Ella's dreams were hers to chase, and she wasn't waiting for permission to make them come true. And that's the lesson here. Never let anyone's ignorance diminish your belief in yourself. People may not always understand your journey, but that doesn't mean it's not worth taking. Be proud of your truth, because when you stand firm in what you believe, you give others the space to do the same. For those of you watching, remember, you don't need anyone else's approval to be great. Your dreams are valid, your efforts are worthy, and you belong in every space you choose to enter. Don't shrink for anyone. If you enjoyed this story and found it inspiring, comment 1 below. If you think there's room for improvement, comment 0 and let me know how I can make this content even more engaging. Your feedback helps me grow and create better videos for you. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more uplifting stories like this. Keep believing in yourself, and the world will eventually see what you already know.